Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. Before we dive headfirst into the chaos that unfolded in that Walmart parking lot, let me paint a quick picture of who I am. Actually, it doesn't matter who I am. It has very little to do with what I'm about to tell you today, to be honest. So just know that I'm a regular 40-year-old woman with a tedious shopping list. You know, the usual drill. Grab some veggies, toss in a bag of chips, because who can resist those, and load up on toilet paper like it's about to go extinct. I honestly never imagined that my mundane trip to Walmart would turn into a bonkers scene straight out of a movie like it did. The encounter I'm about to tell you about starts after I was done shopping and had a cart full of goodies. I head out to the parking lot to hop into my car and drive back home. Nothing too exciting really, but here's where things get, well, interesting. As I'm walking to my car, I spot this elderly lady struggling with her shopping cart. She's trying to maneuver it to her car, but it's clear this cart has seen better days. And then, out of the blue, one of the wheels decides it's had enough and makes a break for it, causing the lady to lose control over it, and eventually it bump into one of the parked cars around. And guess who's sitting in that car? You got it, Karen. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh no, not a Karen. Yep, we've got a live one. Karen gets out from her scratched-up car, ready to rain down judgment on the poor old lady, who's now looking flabbergasted and a bit guilty. Without wasting a second, Karen starts laying into the old lady with a barrage of accusations and colorful language. Meanwhile, I'm just standing there, wide-eyed and utterly confused by the craziness I'm witnessing. She was instant on giving the old lady a piece of her mind, loud and clear. As the heated exchange continues, I can't help but feel a growing urge to step in and defend the old lady from Karen's tirade. Without a second thought, I take a deep breath and make my way towards them. It's the classic, don't just stand there, do something moment. And I can't let this bullying go unchecked. As I approach, I can practically feel the intensity of Karen's glare burning into me. Before I can utter a word, Karen moves like a storm, shoving me with surprising force. I stumble back, caught off guard by her sudden aggression. As I regain my footing, Karen shifts her attention back to the old lady and she tells her, "You're next, old hag." She heads back to her car, and my heart races as I wonder what she's up to. She opens the compartment of her car, and my mind races through 100 possibilities of what she might pull out. A weapon, perhaps. The situation has escalated far beyond anything I could have anticipated. Karen approaches us once more, holding whatever she retrieved from her car behind her back. And just when it feels like all hope might be lost, a police car creeps onto the scene, inching its way toward us. I don't know whether someone had called them after seeing the altercation, or was they there patrolling around to start with. I didn't really care. All I know is that in that moment, the sight of those flashing lights gave me a sense of relief. As the police car draws closer, Karen's attention shifts, and she clearly starts to panic. But before the cops can fully process what's happening, shots ring out, bullets strike the police car's windshield, and chaos erupts. Panic and screams fill the air, and everyone around us scatters, seeking cover. I pull over the elderly lady, and we duck behind a nearby car. Karen continues firing at the cops, who are hunkered down in their car, trying to avoid getting hit. And then, something out of a Hollywood movie happens. The cop in the driver's seat shifts the car into drive, guns the engine, and without even flinching, barrels straight toward Karen. It's like a scene from a high-octane action film, except it's happening in the Walmart parking lot. The cop car plows into Karen, knocking her off her feet and effectively ending her rampage. The other cop rushes out of the car, gun drawn, and approaches Karen cautiously. Backup and an ambulance are called, and the scene turns from chaotic to controlled in mere seconds. By this point, I'm still crouched behind a car, peeking out here and there. The old lady is equally shocked, trying to process the madness she's just witnessed. The cops manage to get Karen in handcuffs while she's moaning in pain on the ground. I later learned that our Karen wasn't just your everyday entitled person. She had some serious skeletons in her closet. You see, For someone with a laundry list of felonies and outstanding warrants like Karen, the last thing they want is to have a run-in with the cops. It's like their worst nightmare come true, and they do just about anything to avoid it. Eventually, the EMTs arrive and tend to Karen's injuries. Handcuffed and on a stretcher, she eventually gets wheeled away. The cops stay behind, taking statements and piecing together what in the world just happened. We give ours, and I escort the old lady to her car and ask one of the officers to please make sure she gets back home safely, since I'm not sure if she'll be able to drive in that state or not. And they comply. They give her a ride home after she told them that she can send her son to retrieve the car from the parking lot later. I go back home, hug my two beautiful daughters, and cry as I got really emotional and cried my eyes out the moment I stepped into my house and saw my beloved family. I mean, I came this close to not seeing them ever again. Anyways, it was a few days later that I found myself down a rabbit hole of online research, trying to make sense of what had transpired. And that's when I stumbled upon a little nugget of information that completely blew my mind. It turns out that in certain situations, police officers are indeed allowed to use their vehicles as a deadly weapon to neutralize a threat. Now, don't get me wrong. It doesn't exactly paint a pretty picture, but in these high-stress life-or-death situations, officers are trained to make split-second decisions to protect themselves and the public. And if using their vehicle as a means to stop a dangerous individual is the best option in the moment, well, they're allowed to take that route. As for Karen, from what I gathered, she had sustained cuts and bruises, and the impact of the cop car had resulted in a broken leg. The injuries she sustained weren't life-threatening by any means, but they were enough to land her in the hospital for a while, then behind bars for a long, long time after. And so, my friends, as I wrap up this post, I want to leave you with a simple reminder. In the midst of our routines and everyday tasks, it's easy to forget just how fragile and unpredictable life can be. So, let's take a moment to appreciate every laugh, every hug, and every peaceful day, because you never know when things might take a dramatic turn, reminding us to hold our loved ones close and cherish the moments that make life truly special. We recently went to an auction and sold our house. The couple who purchased it turned out to be rude, entitled individuals. We were very thorough in preparing our sale documents, going above and beyond to detail all the renovation work we'd completed. Due to public holidays during our open house period, we also had more than the usual inspection times and even opened the house privately for some interested parties. There was ample opportunity for checking everything out. The auction went fine, but the first sign of trouble came afterward. The couple took nearly 2 hours to sign the contract. It was explained to them that this was an unconditional sale, meaning they couldn't pull out for any reason without losing their deposit. They also couldn't request a building or pest inspection now and use the findings as a reason to back out and receive their deposit back. Those inspections should have been organized before the purchase. That's how it works here when it's an auction. A private sale has different rules. They then asked to purchase some furniture, which we said we'd think about. In the next few days, the real estate agent started plaguing us with numerous texts and calls, asking various questions about the property on behalf of the couple. What are the roof tiles made of? When did we last clean the roof? What is the deck made of? What is the material under the deck? Where is the storage battery for the solar panels? Have we had the air conditioning serviced? Etc., etc., etc. We answered all, but it started to become annoying, and we advised the agents that all this information was either in the ad or the building report, or it should have been discussed before the purchase. It became clear that the couple were wealthy investors who had moved from another country and just bought the house off the photos. They then demanded a building inspection. Our conveyancer urgently advised against this. If they found a pretense to pull out of the deal, they would lose their deposit, yes, but then we would have no funds for the settlement of our new house. We didn't have any legal obligations to say yes, so I advised no. The agents harassed us for a week, begging, but I told them to drop the topic and that it was a definite no. The couple then asked to bring forward the settlement date. We were actually okay with this, but the lady we purchased our new house from was not. To make the money work, we needed to settle the old and new houses on the same day. Otherwise, we would have to spend a lot of money putting ourselves up in a hotel for a few weeks. We couldn't afford that and so said no. This angered the couple because they then had to pay extra rent where they were currently living. We apologized, but it was out of our hands. The agents harassed us again on the couple's behalf, but we stayed firm. Another barrage of questions about the house followed, which we answered. They then asked us which furniture we were selling them. We declined to sell anything as these people were just too much trouble. Then the couple asked for their pre-settlement inspection. This is normal to check that nothing included in the sale contract has been moved from the home, like fixtures and fittings such as curtains, etc. It's legally not meant to be done until 7 days before settling. They requested it 15 days out. We tried to tell them to come on the Monday or Tuesday before settlement, so that the house would be empty. They refused. We ended up saying yes, as we didn't want them there while we had our storage containers on site and had scheduled time to be packing. We made it clear the house was not in final sale condition, and they were agreeing to settle as is with our goods taken out. They agreed in writing. On the inspection day, we happened to have an old couch on the nature strip awaiting hard rubbish collection. It had been completely torn up by our cats, and not even any of the neighborhood scavengers had collected it. They were clearly upset we didn't sell the furniture to them and accused us of dumping rubbish on their property. We reminded them it wasn't theirs yet and showed them the council booking slip for collection. We drove around the block at inspection time and settled in the court opposite, watching them bring someone we highly suspected was a builder on site without our permission. We couldn't prove it though. Finally, we were packing our storage containers the weekend before settlement. We took a 5-minute break and sat inside with the front door and container door open, keeping an ear out if anyone started sniffing about our goods. Lo and behold, we heard people walking around in the driveway next to our containers. I got out of my seat like a shot and instantly saw these guys were builders measuring our fence. I demanded to know what they thought they were doing. They said they were told no one would be there and they were allowed in. I snapped and told them this was still my property. They didn't have permission to be there, and they needed to leave. They refused and said, "Oh, we'll just be a minute doing this." I said no, they were trespassing and to get out. They started walking over to me, being threatening and intimidating, getting in my personal space. I am a woman, under 5 feet, and an easy target in their eyes, I guess. At this point, they looked up and saw my very tall and large husband coming towards them, and they quickly left for their car. I called the agents and my conveyancer in a rage and let them know this was completely unacceptable, and I would call the police if they were seen again. The couple denied they sent them. The day of settlement came. All was good for the money. We handed our keys over and breathed a sigh of relief that this was all over. But it wasn't. We got an angry email from the couple's conveyancer claiming we left goods on the property and didn't leave it in fit condition for settlement. They said that as their client wasn't allowed on the property, he couldn't check for this properly. We reminded the conveyancer that his client had already put in writing that they came to inspect too early and accepted the condition of the house. He attached pictures of the goods they wanted picked up. It was a bag of rubbish we forgot in the shed, probably from the day their builders came and we were distracted. In the photo were also things like spare fence pickets and roof tiles, which we left as a courtesy. Fine, we said, this was all too hard, we'd come and get it. So we had to get permission to go on the property, as it wasn't ours anymore. My husband got there and started packing up everything in the photo. The owners freaked out and demanded that he leave everything there. My husband refused until they put in writing what they wanted left. Begrudgingly, they wrote that they wanted the fence pickets and all the spare bathroom and roof tiles left. Then my husband took the paint tins we left. Remember, we just renovated before we sold, so we left some paint for touch-ups. They wanted him to leave it all there but refused to put it in writing, so he took it all, including the snail pellets. Oh well, the garden has a massive snail problem, but they can pay out of their own pocket to deal with that now. In the end, all they really wanted gone was the bag of rubbish and the decorative steel panels at the back of the house, which we left as a fixture fitting as per the contract. But anyway, they just made a fuss as retaliation about the builder to inconvenience us. The icing on the cake, they demanded my husband change the alarm code for them on his way out. He told them no, it was not his responsibility to do that, and he had left them detailed written instructions on how to do it themselves. They said they couldn't figure it out. He shrugged and told them to get a technician, then walked out. By contrast, at our new home, the previous owner left us a long handwritten letter explaining how the house works, some menus of her favorite takeout, and her number, if there were any questions. She left us spare light globes, electrical parts, fittings, and spare floorboards. We were happy about that, as we intend to change out the old carpet and can now match the rest of the flooring. We found that she left behind some handwritten recipes and cookbooks. We texted her thanks for the note and asked if she would like her books. She was so grateful. That's how it should have gone. The people we sold to were so awful to deal with. If they had been nicer, we would have left the couple a handwritten note of our own, explaining to avoid the neighbor on the right, as he has no sense of social norms, and the only way to get him to leave is to slam the door in his face. Oh, and also he has severe pest problems on his property. It's a giant forest in suburbia, and he doesn't maintain it. Oh well, hope they don't mind rodents, ticks, all manner of spiders, including nests of redbacks, jumping jack ants, eastern brown snakes, and foxes, or grass that is as tall as your shoulders. We also would have explained to avoid the neighbor to the left, who we were sure was involved in illegal activities, with motorcycles at his house at all hours, constantly having roof plumbing done, pressure washing his truck most days to clean the residue, and in his off time, he plays with power tools in a manner that can only be described as grinding a block of steel. Looking back, it actually wasn't a great place to live to start with, and it got worse over the years. I guess karma caught up to them. Hope they enjoy it. So, some backstory first. I work at a large grocery store chain. As someone who stocks groceries, replaces items that have been left or returned throughout the day, and various other chores around the store. It's a pretty small store, so most of the employees can do almost all of the tasks. So this particular night, I was putting away a cart of items that customers decided they didn't want, overstock, or were damaged. There was a separate area where damaged items went, obviously. Now, I should preface this with the fact that I'm not completely deaf. I can faintly hear things like slamming doors, loud phones, ringtones, and some things like that. Though I cannot hear voices at all, even loud yelling. While I am deaf, I know sign language, have a large pin and lanyard that I wear that informs people that I am in fact deaf. In addition to this, I have a small notebook that has a variety of pre-written responses to questions, sort of like flashcards. Though communication is difficult sometimes, I try my best to make things work, and I am very prepared. Most people are understanding work with me, and we get through the conversation. Some kind people even sign with me. That always makes me smile. I am pretty young and don't look like the typical hearing-impaired person. So when people sometimes get a little grumpy because I don't respond right away, they're very apologetic. Not this time. This is where the story gets good. So I'm mulling along one evening, and decided to get an early start on the overstock from the day, which was filling a shopping cart to the max. Since this was earlier than I normally began, there were more people still in the store as opposed to when I usually started. No big deal. I started anyway. About half a shopping cart later, I'm in the paper towels section when I feel someone roughly poke me in the shoulder. I jump and turn around, startled to see this lady. She's taller than me, and I'm no slouch. I'm 6 feet tall, or 72 inches. She is very thin, probably mid-50s, frizzy blonde hair only held back by a bright red hat atop her head. This back in September of 2020, and of course she doesn't have a mask on. She begins, to what I assume was yelling, judging by the aggressive look on her face. I begin to point to my lanyard and ears, trying to communicate that I can't hear her. According to the nice customer who I will introduce in a moment, she was saying things like, "I'm talking to you, I've been trying to get your attention for 5 minutes." She then takes a step forward and grabs my lanyard, yanking it violently, and it gets unsnapped from around my neck. She throws it to the ground. At this point I'm very nervous and beginning to panic. I try to actually say I can't hear, but I'm not sure how it came out, as I've never actually heard my own voice. My significant other says it sounds very cute, however. It's at this point the nice customer enters the picture. I see him round the corner. A 30-something-year-old man, I assume, rounds the aisle and walks up to the crazy Karen, asking what the problem was. This is all what he wrote down for me, saying what he said after the incident. Nice customer looks over to me, and I frantically point to the pin on my mask and grab my notebook and scribble down, "I'm deaf and I don't know why she's yelling at me." Nice customer turns to crazy Karen and they exchange some words. Things like, "Can't you see he's deaf? Why are you yelling at a kid like that?" And responses like, "He's not deaf, he's just ignoring me because he's a lazy little jerk." This goes on for a few minutes, and I finally begin to cry, as this has caused a scene with people starting to surround us. It finally attracted the attention of my 2 managers, store manager and district manager. The store manager walks up to me, while the district manager walks to nice customer and crazy Karen, who have now really started shouting at each other. Store manager knows sign language and asks me if I'm all right. I say I am, and wipe the tears from my face and grab my lanyard from the ground. The store manager tells me to grab my things and wait for her in the employee break room. About 15 minutes later, the store manager and district manager walked in with a police officer. The crazy Karen had been arrested. The store manager explained to me in sign language that crazy Karen had been arrested for 3rd-degree assault, and the officer needed a written statement and asked if I wanted to press charges. I happily say yes and give my statement. The nice customer stuck around, and I wrote him a thank you note. Store manager also gave him a gift card for being an upstanding citizen. That was by far the worst experience I've ever had with a customer, but I'm thankful that awesome people like nice customer, store manager, and district manager exist. Also, crazy Karen got sentenced to a few months in jail, probation, and was fined a hefty amount. Backstory: 25 years ago, my aunt passed away when I was a baby, leaving my 2 cousins, who were both in their early 20s, alone to fend for themselves. My grandparents, who were very wealthy, put a clause in their will that the grandkids would receive half of their inheritance if a parent passed before the children reached age 30, and the other half when my grandparents eventually passed. Both my cousins received a very sizable inheritance, coupled with the money they got from selling my aunt's house. The younger of the 2 paid off her college loans and was able to buy property, where she still lives today. The older sibling squandered all of his money. Within 6 years he was back to living in a condo, working as a police officer. Everyone in our small family knew he had a substance issue, so he was barely making ends meet with his officer's salary while buying copious amounts of illegal substances. Over the next 4 years my cousin went to rehab 3 times, sponsored by my grandparents. He sobered up after getting his girlfriend, now wife, pregnant. She was an absolutely dreadful woman. She saw my grandparents as a payday and essentially trapped my cousin with a baby, thinking it was her ticket. Within 7 years they had 3 kids, so she was locked in tight. She is a nurse, and with 3 kids around, they always needed a little boost. Guess who they would always ask? You got it, my grandparents. Being the kind spirits they are, they always lent a hand. My father, mother, sister, and I got sick of it very quickly. My grandmother unfortunately passed away when I was 17, leaving my grandpa as the last remaining grandparent. I was undoubtedly my grandfather's favorite among the grandkids, which left a real sore spot with my cousin and his wife. I had 2 more years at home before college, so I lived with my grandpa to keep him company and help take care of him. My cousin and his wife hated this so much that whenever they came to visit and I was not home, they would send their 3 kids into my room to destroy it. My room had double doors, so it couldn't be locked. This was the start. The longer I lived there, the more they would mess with me. My cousin even went as far as to place one of those little mechanical noisemakers in the cabinet in my room. The ones that play sounds at random intervals that make you think you're insane. Thankfully, my German Shepherd would always hear it, and after a week or so, she finally found it. They did this to distance me, and deter me from taking care of Grandpa so they could swoop in and be the heroes. This continued until one of the kids found my gun. By this time, I was 18 and in the possession of a firearm. I use quotations because my grandfather has guns, but he can no longer aim and shoot them due to arthritis and nerve degeneration. So when I moved in, he placed all the weapons in my hands should the need for self-defense arise. But should he see them out for any reason other than cleaning, there would be trouble. Being very well trained with guns, and having a sense of pride in defending my home, I took this responsibility very seriously. I always kept a handgun in a locked container in my nightstand, with the key on a high shelf out of reach from the kids. One fateful day, I was out getting my grandfather's food when I came home to find my older cousin, his wife, and my grandfather staring at a gun on the table. It was my gun that I kept in the lockbox. It was loaded and had a bullet chambered. I always keep a magazine in the lockbox, but never loaded into the gun. The lockbox was nowhere to be seen. My cousin claimed one of the children found the gun and was playing with it. I was 100% certain that he either found the key or broke the lockbox open to get to it and load it, as a 6-year-old would not be able to reach a key I could barely grab, figure out what it was for, load my gun, and chamber it. I tried my best to explain that what my cousin had said was nonsense and that I never keep my firearms loaded in the house, but my cousin, who is a police officer, scolded me on gun safety and threatened to have me arrested if I didn't leave. He hadn't arrested me yet, because we're family. I was asked to collect my belongings and go back to my parents. My cousin had won, or so he thought. The next day, I apologized to Grandpa and explained to him there was no way one of the kids could have gotten the key. He agreed with me and apologized, but thought it best I move out until things cooled down. Once they did, I would be welcome back home. Our relationship was a little fractured due to disinformation provided by my cousin. A month later, my grandfather died of a heart attack at 86. I was devastated. I was just beginning to get back into rhythm with him and rebuilding the trust that was somewhat shattered. To this day, I am still unsure of what kind of man he saw me as due to my cousin. Immediately, my cousin and his wife began sucking up to my dad. Having sealed payday with Grandpa, it was time to move on to the uncle. This persisted for a month or two. I wouldn't stand for it. Then came time for the will. My grandfather's lawyer read out the will to me, my father, mother, and sister in our home. Our 2 cousins would be briefed individually on their share of the estate, per my grandparents' requests. Then the miracle line in the will came to fruition. If anyone attempts to claim any part of the estate that is not assigned to them, they forfeit any assets they are supposed to receive, and they will be divided equally among the remaining family members. This was basically their way of saying, if you try to claim more than you're given, you get nothing. My father was supposed to receive every piece of physical property, aside from 2 or 3 items he set aside for me, from my grandparents, as he was the only remaining child. The revenge. I hatched my plan. I called my cousin and told him all of Grandma's jewelry was to be donated to a charity auction. Grandma's collection of gems and medals was extensive, to say the least, so a charity event wouldn't care if a few pieces didn't make it, right? It was a lure of gargantuan proportions that my greedy cousin could not resist. He bit right on it and headed over to my grandparents' house as soon as possible, determined to snatch up as much as he could. A handful would send his kids to college. Regardless of what I said, the jewelry was never going to go to him anyway, so his actions were purely his own, since none of it was destined to be his. Coincidentally, Dad was on his way with the lawyer to my grandparents' house to overlook everything, formality stuff. According to my dad's testimony, my cousin had 3 shoeboxes worth of Grandma and Grandpa's jewelry piled on the kitchen counter, ready for loading into his car. My dad and the lawyer stood in the kitchen, wondering why it was all there when my cousin walked in from my grandparents' bedroom with a fourth and final shoebox. The jig was up, and he put two and two together that I had set him up, which was true. But there was no penalty against me for exploiting my cousin's greed so he would mess himself over. It's worth noting that between the 18 years from my aunt's death and my grandpa's death, their wealth had increased several times over. So my cousin felt cheated and expected to receive just as much as my sister and me, despite receiving half of his already and blowing it. Throughout this whole ordeal, his younger sister, my other cousin, had not had a problem at all and was still weeping over Grandpa's death like the rest of us. However, just like that, my cousin lost enough money in the course of 30 minutes to make him contemplate his sanity. Over greed. My cousin's terrible wife apparently filed for divorce a few weeks later. We haven't heard from him in nearly 6 years. As he is all but disgraced now, you can call this a fairy tale ending. And in this particular part of the story it somewhat is. There was a massive lawsuit by an unknown family member involving the Internal Revenue Service and the Federal Bureau of Investigation later on. But honestly, I would rather have my grandparents. Last year, I sold my home in my homeowners association, HOA. About 5 years ago, I bought a 1,500 square foot townhome condo in an up-and-coming town right in the downtown area. This was a valuable property, with home prices having increased by 35% since I purchased it. It was a wonderful area within walking distance of everything I loved as a single bachelor. When I moved in, all my neighbors were wonderful. We all got along great except for one person. She belonged to the HOA board but was moving on because you can only serve 8 years. We'll call her Gimpy J. Gimpy J is a 65-plus-year-old widow whose husband died unexpectedly from a heart attack. She doesn't have much to do. She met a man online and moved on, and I was happy for her. Talking to my passive neighbors, I heard bits and pieces about why things were the way they were at the HOA because of Gimpy J and another woman who had to move because of age. On the board, the two of them bullied residents. They changed the landscaping from mulch to pine needles. They stopped upkeep on the pool deck because they hated kids, and they reported one house for anything and everything because the kids were too loud. She bullied a woman with multiple sclerosis because Gimpy J was feeding feral cats and attracting raccoons and possums near our homes, and animal control was called. Residents did not like her. I got married, and my wife has been living with me for 2 years now. We are very happy. During this time, Gimpy J began spending more and more time with her new boyfriend. He lives about an hour away from our house in the country. She would initially spend the weekend, then a week there, until she began living there all the time with very little time spent here. Maybe 15 minutes to 2 hours a month at our complex. Now at our complex, there is only one rule on parking. Each resident is entitled to 2 spots close to their building, but not necessarily in front of their unit, and there is no limit to parking spots you may occupy. Close to it is the key phrase. We have new folks on the board who are all under 40 years of age, and the place is starting to get spruced up. We have some friends over regularly, and they park in front of our unit. Gimpy J had 2 hip replacements done, and we had not seen her in about 7 months. Our little area of the complex consists of 8 townhomes that face each other, 4 on one side and 4 on the other. There are 8 spots for 3 homes and a handicapped spot for one of our neighbors. Gimpy J started coming back around in January for longer periods. A day on the weekend to go out downtown or to visit friends. She started complaining that we were in her spots. Again, there are no assigned spots. We were willing to move our friends' vehicles for her to another empty spot, until she started occupying 2 spots at a time with her vehicle. This behavior continued as she would come in, taking 2 spots anytime she was here. The rules in the master deed state that no vehicle can take more than 1 spot without written permission from the board of directors or property management group, and cannot continue for more than 2 days with permission. This was to account for residents moving in and out. Suddenly that spring, my wife had a medical issue and was hospitalized for 4 days and on disability for 8 weeks. My mom was the only family member on both sides who could come down to where we live to help us out. She drove down, and we needed to occupy 3 spots. I promptly let our property management company and the board of directors know what was happening, providing them with my mom's make, model, and plate number, and that she would be here for 6 to 8 weeks, just in case anyone had an issue. Gimpy J's first time home in 6 weeks. We had a car in front of her house, but she had room for her vehicle. She marched over, banged loudly on the door, and demanded we move the car. She even tried to open my front door and walk into my home. Yes, she tried to enter my home. It was so loud that it shook my dog, who peed herself and then growled and chased her out. I promptly told her there were no assigned parking spots, and that the rule was 1 car per spot. We would move a car out of respect one last time, and saw she occupied 2 spots with it per usual. The next time it happened, 2 weeks later, we refused to move our vehicle. We also began taking pictures for our records and communicating with our HOA about Gimpy J's erratic behavior. She continued to arrive, bang on our door, and scream at us for having a car parked in her spot. One time, while banging on the door, she dented the frame with her keys. A few additional times when we were not home, she would come in and park, occupying 2 spots. I would take more pictures for my records in case something happened because of her erratic behavior. Finally, it happened. About this time last year, I was at the gym and got a call from my mom and my wife, frantic that someone was going to tow my wife's car. I drove home as fast as I could, and it was Gimpy J's boyfriend's son and his girlfriend, whom we had never met. This man, who doesn't live here and has no business here, was screaming at us and insulting my pregnant wife and mother. My mother-in-law pays X dollars a month for these spots. You jerks are breaking the rules. I'm going to tow that SUV, all while drinking beer. Now we knew he couldn't do anything except scream and try to intimidate us outside. He called his mother-in-law, who is not married to his father, about the situation. Gimpy J drove an hour to our complex. When she got here, she parked her car behind all 3 of ours and got out, blocking us in. I had enough. I quickly snapped some pictures and called the police. I will not feel unsafe or be harassed in my neighborhood by people who do not live there or are barely there. Gimpy J realized I called the police and moved her car. I printed out all my documentation, pictures, and communication from the HOA. I showered quickly, because I was sweaty from the gym, and threw on a nice polo shirt and shorts. My pregnant wife sat in her rocking chair, and my mother sat calmly at the kitchen table. The police arrived, and we could see them hollering, waving arms wildly, and screaming. The police came to the door, and we kindly opened up. Gimpy J tried to walk in before I blocked her and asked her to leave my property. I invited the police officers inside. We apologized that we even had to call them over something so petty, but our neighbor was acting crazy, and her behavior had been escalating. We explained what was happening, showed them communication from the HOA, and showed them pictures. The officer quickly had enough of these unruly people. He imposed a no trespass order on my porch and would not let her near my property. If she stepped foot on our walkway, she would be in violation of the order and would be arrested. We watched him go back out and explain calmly to her, and she started screaming along with her boyfriend's kid and his girlfriend. This went on for a while, and the officer called for backup. A second car arrived promptly. Gimpy J declared it was her property too. She paid her fees, and that he couldn't do that because everything was community property outside of a home. She marched up to my stoop, and he arrested her. He charged her with disorderly conduct and harassment. The police then told Gimpy J's boyfriend's son to go home. He got in his truck with his girlfriend and drove off. As soon as he hit the road outside of our complex, the second police officer pulled him over for driving under the influence. That's right. The man screaming at my wife and mother had been drinking the entire time and was intoxicated. The police couldn't do anything in the complex but could when he hit the main road. Both of them were hauled off to jail, and we stopped hearing from them about parking. 2 days later, Gimpy J and her boyfriend showed up at the complex. They parked her boyfriend's car in our lot and left it, parked in one spot to ensure it was hers. Well, they drove off, and we didn't hear from them for a week, and no one was home. Since Gimpy J's boyfriend does not live here and his car was abandoned, I called the HOA to report it. They came and towed his SUV. Gimpy J put her house on the market 8 weeks later. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.